The scramble for Africa, surely one of the most defining moments in the age of imperialism, and it completely shaped the African continent into what we know it today. The scramble for Africa is the direct cause of one of the biggest artificial borders and nationality conflicts in the history of mankind. For those who do not know what the scramble for Africa is though, here is a brief explanation. The African continent was the last one to not be completely explored and exploited by the European powers. This was because it had a lot of really harsh climates and the biomes were so different and rich that it was even difficult for the natives to adapt to them, let alone the Europeans. The Europeans originally did explore Africa in the start of the age of exploration, with the Portuguese and Spanish frequently exploring the north and west coast. But after that, it was put at a lower place of interest in North and South America due to the abundances in the Americas and its harsh terrain. This meant that for centuries, this continent was only used for access to slave labour, and never seen as a lucrative or reasonable area to conquer for the Europeans, that reputed it uninhabitable for them. So, till the start of the 18th century, it was seen as an unviable route of power compared to the luxuries of Asia and the Americas, with just Portugal having major territories, and the other nations just having some trade posts and coasts. But in the 18th and 19th century, this changed, due to most of the rest of the world being already taken. This brought the Dutch to establish the Cape Colony in modern South Africa, and the French to start conquering the northern lands of this forsaken continent. The new era of the European colonization culminated with the famous Conference of Berlin in 1884 to 1845. This dictated which European power would get which slice of the metaphorical African pie. This treaty, obviously, excluded the natives themselves. But what if the treaty at the end of the conference was different? How would this change today's borders, cultures, and languages? This is a scenario that will be researched today.
We have come up with a lot of interesting possible resolutions the Berlin Conference could have had, but, uniting all of our most voted on points, we came up with this final alternative treaty. Remember that all of the previous lands in Africa occupied by the Europeans will remain with their former colonizers, and that only the additional changes made in the Berlin Conference will be made. This is the alternate resolution of said conference. The major plot differences are that the Wallis Bay, a British colony in the middle of the coast of Namibia, remains British, while the South African-German border being drawn from there, and that the Caliphate of Sokoto, a large and powerful nation in modern-day Nigeria that often traded with the Europeans, is decided to be left independent and even given more land, just like Abyssinia. So in this scenario, the British, having gained more land in South Africa, lay off most of the claims to the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. That means that the Germans, interested already in having a bigger East German colony, will get it. The Spanish are able to snatch off all of Morocco and some more equatorial territories, and the Portuguese, now with the British not being in their way, are able to unite their two colonies in southern Africa. The other big change is that France, in this timeline, not being stopped by the Brits, is able to bully both Italy and Belgium, which also didn't claim parts of the southern Congo, into leaving some territories in Libya and the Congo to them. Luckily, Italy will also be able to have Somaliland, but will never be able to forget this act of French aggression, as we will see later. The Dutch were also interested in lands in Africa, mostly in their south, but after the British annexed the Cape, they lost hope for that continent.
The Dutch ask for Madagascar, but are just given the northern area, and a trading post to reach the East Indies. This will make them obviously worsen their relationship with the French and the British, which will make them closer to Germany, now pissed at the Great Britain for stopping their claims to Namibia. Some years after that, the British, now realizing that they weren't content with what they got in West Africa, intend to attack and conquer the Sokoto Caliphate. In fact, although being really large, Sokoto had a lot of good resources for the British, like rubber, which was really useful in those times. So with that, the British start the invasion of Sokoto. The problem with that is A. It was a breaking of the Berlin Conference Treaty, and B. The Germans saw this as another way for the Brits to expand their empire in unlawful lands. The only nation that openly supported the invasion was France, the biggest ally of Great Britain. The successful British conquest of Sokoto caused higher tensions to grow. At this point, the alliances were pretty obvious. The Italians, the Dutch, and the Germans all had claims on British or French colonies, and they all sought to respect the treaty made in Berlin, while the French and the Brits saw these nations as their new enemies, and the ones that wanted to stop their glory. So here is formed the new factions, one made by Germans and the other one made by British. These were the Die Berliner Stiftung and the Birmingham Agreement. Portugal joins automatically the British faction, as they were previously allied. Immediately after, the Russians, that had the intentions of obtaining colonies and that were in good relationship with the Germans, joined the Berliner Stiftung. Scared of a possible Russian threat, the Ottoman Empire immediately joins the opposite Birmingham Agreement faction. Now the alliances are ready for war, the Great War, and the tensions are on the highest ground. The war all starts when the Sukhothans rebel against their new master English, and the Germans use this as a casus belli for the war. The war starts slowly, and it's mostly fighter in the colonies, but both Germany and Italy start pushing through France. Luckily for the French is well protected in their eastern borders, so the Germans diplomatically ask the Belgians to pass through, and the Belgians, in this timeline being enemies of the French that bullied them into leaving parts of the Congo, agree, with the only thing in exchange being that all the French Congo would be given to them. While this is happening, the Dutch start a naval battle with the Brits, and although they would never surely win in a 1 versus 1, the Germans come to help, and the situation is a draw. In the meantime, Boers revolted in South Africa, and helped the Dutch take over, after they'd finished conquering Madagascar. In the meantime, the Russians push through the sick men of Europe, easily reaching Istanbul, while the Arabs in the south revolt against the Turks. The Brits are although able to get the German Togo and capture parts of Italian Libya, while the French get finally capitulated in Europe but continue the fight in the colonies. They, Abyssinia, decided to attack Italy, after they were paid and armed by the British. The Italians now, that France is no longer a problem, decide to move their troops into the colonies, fastly capturing Addis Ababa and capitulating Abyssinia. Meanwhile, South Africa is completely occupied by the Dutch. The Ottomans capitulate, and the Arab Revolution ends in favor of them, with the Empire of Arabia being formed under the Heyyazid dynasty. The Sukhothans are horribly repressed by the British, and Islam is banned in the ex-colony. After most of Britain's allies capitulate, and the Portuguese sign a white peace ending the century-long alliance with Britain, the British accept to go end the Great War in Addis Ababa, still controlled by the Italians. Since most of the lands that were British weren't conquered, they will lose relatively little. South Africa and Madagascar will be annexed by the Dutch, and Namibia will become fully German. Uganda will also be annexed by the Germans. The Belgian Congo colony will greatly expand at the north in favor of the French, and the Italian will annex Ethiopia and French Libya, Corsica, Savoy, and Nice. The Germans will also annex Inner Alsace-Lorraine. The Sokoto Caliphate will be released, although way smaller. The Russians will annex the Armenian Anatolia and Constantinople, while the Ottoman Empire will be dissolved into Turkey and Thrace. This is the end of the Great War. It's changed the culture of map and the map forever. And with that, the scenario is over. Special thanks to all the creators of this video: Italian Mapper, Karen, Ryan Orgdansk, Salt, another Italian, North Tyrol Mapper, Swissy, another mapper, and many more. Thanks for helping in this amazing video collaboration, and I hope you will all see in the next episode we make. Ask in the comments whatever you would like to see.